Hello and welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 550. Can you believe it? We just did 500.
We did.
50 episodes ago.
50 episodes ago.
Math. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility through this podcast since 2005. So today I've invited Mr. Tim back. Hello, Tim.
Are you sick of me yet?
And we are doing part 4 of On the Road, kind of talking about that road trip that feels like years ago. And I'm delighted to share this with you. We wanted to give a little bit of follow-up, some takeaways, and some thoughts on kind of planning and scheduling your own travel, even if you don't have the ability to actually get on the road. So we've got some ideas and tips on that. So a couple things I want to mention. Be sure to save the date. September 19th is our next free TDJ Live Masterclass, where we get together for an hour on a Sunday night. And we chat about all things tranquility. So free event. Be sure to sign up for that. You can find that in the show notes, kimberlywilson.com/550. And then also, if you missed the TDJ Live for summer and would like the replay, there's a link to find that also. In the fall, I'm going to be offering the TDJ Lifestyle e-course, which is a 5-week course going through all of the tenets, which are compassion, creativity, style, mindfulness, and wellness. So if you're interested in learning more about this 5-week course, be sure to sign up and join the waitlist. And again, you can find all this over in the show notes, or of course at kimberlywilson.com. So without further ado, delighted to be here with you, and let's chat takeaways.
I think that you should do the first one.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Maybe eat better. All right. So
I like it. Maybe eat better.
I'm looking at your notes. You wrote maybe. I'm like, definitely. So what's funny is after we did part 3 of On the Road, one of the questions was, is there anything you would do differently? And I was like, no, I felt like everything was really great, blah, blah, blah. And then afterwards I was like, you know what? Actually, I think I would have eaten less and had less wine. I was telling a friend that I met up with for a belated birthday brunch over the weekend. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'd have one glass of wine with a meal. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. I think I'll have another, which I rarely have 2 glasses of wine.
That's true.
And I did it like nightly. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. And then eating, it's like I'd never eaten before. I mean, and I know you said, well, it's vacation, it's like you indulge. Yes. And I still think maybe I could have had one less appetizer per night and one less dessert. And
one less bag of taffy.
One less bag of taffy.
Per night.
And one last glass of wine. So, I think that's the one thing that, whenever I think about, okay, how could I have enhanced my experience, because I'm really paying for it now, of just like feeling just not great, and some of the places, one thing, some of the places did not have blenders, and I'm a big smoothie person, so I couldn't have those, right? So, and not to make excuses, and we went out for dinners. We basically went out, for every kind of dinner, since we were in different cities and what have you. And it was like fun to get out and about. So, I would just say, like, definitely, I'm glad I enjoyed it. And I think I just could have trimmed some things back.
I think that's about right. I think that we were in work mode because we were working most of the time, but I think that we were in vacation mode for our eating, and that was 6 weeks. So we definitely did it up, and I don't really regret it so much, but I think that I'm with you. A little more moderation. Can you do a little more moderation?
I think so.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. I don't know if that's linguistically correct, but I do think that more moderation would have been better. So, all right, maybe eat better.
Yes, you may be.
All right. Well, I guess the second one's more my takeaway.
Yes.
And that was, I think if we were to do this again, which I don't see why we wouldn't, but we don't have any current specific plans to, I would say longer stays in fewer places. one of the elements of this trip was that we really wanted to go to all of these places because there were friends and family in all of these different places, with the possible exception of Point Arena, where that was more just, oh, wow, we're in this amazing space and we were sort of more remote. I think that was one of my more favorite parts of the trip, just because it was like a longer stay, because it was a week and a half. And that felt a little more rooting and nice. So I think if I were to do it again, do another West Coast swing, maybe it would be just stay in the Northwest, or just stay in California, or just stay in Northern California, or just stay in Southern California. But like stay for a nice long rooting time in a really cool place, whether you have friends and family there or not. I think that would be my sort of takeaway. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that comes to mind, because whenever you mention that takeaway, I was like, oh, I really wouldn't change anything, kind of with regard to the times and places. But then I was like, actually, I would. I maybe would have cut out one of the cities, because it was still pretty shut down. And then I would have spent more time in the redwoods,
Yeah.
So that would, so I guess, yeah. Yeah.
I think, to be clear, I wouldn't have changed this trip because I wanted to see everybody that we saw. But I think for a next trip, longer stays, fewer places. The next one's sort of mine as well, but I think you'll have commentary. Know your vehicle if you're doing this as like a road trip like we did. We talked about in great length about the challenge that we had about the cooling system in this car. And I think that part of the issue was this was a relatively new car to me that I hadn't owned for very long. And I think that because I didn't know it as well, that created the drama that we didn't necessarily need to have. So if you are going to be driving and you're like me, where you know next to nothing about vehicles, it's good to know the little quirks about things over time. Just kind of, I don't know. I think that I need to know a little bit more about cars before I do something like this again. Although I feel like that I've learned a lot. Basically, cars want coolant and they want oil. Very important things. I've learned that in both of our big road trips. But also just knowing basic things like, hey, if you have a screw in your tire, it's good to go get that fixed. I knew that, and that I think really saved us some hassle in Oakland. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on know your vehicle?
Well, I think the only thing that comes to mind, but as you were talking, I was like, I don't even know this in my own vehicle, is like cruise control, So it's like, there's all these buttons. Everything is so much more confusing now. And even though that Buick that we had, it was 2011, like it's an old vehicle, but still so many gadgets. And, I don't know how to set cruise control. And so I didn't drive much, but those hour and a half, 2 hour chunks, I was like, man, my shins, kind of hurt. And so that was, something that, would have been nice. Like just some of the basics.
Yeah. And I can show you cruise control. It's a magical thing.
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm like, I'm fine without it. But I think it actually would have been handy.
I feel like I need to show you on the Jeep because you're going to be driving out to the cabin solo soon. And I think that it would make your life a lot happier.
Yeah, maybe. It just seems,
she's not going to. She's
complicated.
She says maybe. She means no. All right. The next one is yours.
More research earlier. So I realized... So we're driving through the mountains of Idaho, right, en route to Seattle. And I'm Googling, okay, where can I get jazz, in Seattle, Portland, Oregon. And we found this amazing place in Oregon. So I'm buying us tickets and booking it and all this. And I used up all my data, and I have a lot of data. And again, not a big deal. I'm like, you're on a trip. It's okay. But my takeaway with this is maybe more research earlier. And I feel like getting out of town, it was a pretty hectic month, May was. And it was just like, all right, okay, done with my clients. Okay, I'm going to load up the car and drive out to West Virginia. And then we're going to go on a 5.5-week road trip. So it's one of those things where it's just like, it was just one foot in front of the other. Now, that's fine. And I think that had I had the ability to do this in advance, just a bit more research, I think it would have been good. And it would have just saved a little like, oh, well, I don't know. Like, what do you think? Can we go here? Can we go there? What about jazz? Well, do we have plans? Because another thing too, with the more research earlier, is getting people nailed down sooner.
Oh my God.
So,
She's talking about my friends.
Yeah. But there are just some people who are just so lovely, right? And you want to see them and you're like, okay, I'm going to be there these days to this days. Okay, great. And it can be hard to nail down to be like, all right, well, so I'm going to see so-and-so this date, but this night is this really great jazz thing I want to go to, right? So just the navigating of all that. So more research and nailing dates down a little sooner, because I'm such a planner and you're such a planner. I think that just helps. But again, without overscheduling, but just knowing like, hey, I can get jazz, this really great place with this really great musician on this date.
Yeah. And I think that last point is really key. We have a finite amount of time, but our obsessive planning nature does not fit within the lifestyle of many of the people that we deal with, family, friends, whatever. So finding that overlap is sometimes a little bit hard. So that's I do think though that more research earlier is always a helpful thing. I was so focused on the logistics of the drive that I think that it fell on you more for the logistics of, hey, what are we going to do there? And I think that was a piece of all of that. And we were just running right up to the end there. So a lot fell on you and your data plan.
Which is totally fine, but I think it is one of those things that it's like, making sure that like, what are your priorities? What do you want to see? What do you want to do? And I think I'm very particular, right? I'm like, I want vegan, jazz, dog friendly, like all this.
And what's
sort of
crazy
stuff.
is she found it.
Often, which is crazy. It is crazy. So it's like you just have to dig. And yeah.
I think that the last point is something that is sort of the counter to all of this, is that you can research and you can overplan. And so our last kind of takeaway was schedule more blocks that are open and make sure that you have downtime. It felt like at times in a full-fledged sprint because of the nature of the time shift of our work day. We worked 9 to 5 effectively, Pacific time. And then after that, it was like, okay, well, now we're running off to this next thing. And then we would be out. And then it was just sort of like, okay, go to bed, wake up, do the same thing over again. And we didn't have a lot of time to just be in some of the places. I think we did a better job of that towards the end of our stay, just because we didn't have as many social obligations. But I think that one of the big things that we noticed is that when we did have those little bits of, oh my gosh, I can sleep in, or, oh, I don't have anything scheduled today, or whatever, we felt better. That felt really a lot like a battery recharge. So schedule more open blocks of time. I'm looking at you, Miss Wilson, because you are terrible at this.
I know. I'm like, oh, here's a spot. I mean, because what's crazy, right? So since we've gotten back, yes, not yesterday. Yes. Well, no, 2 days ago. So anyway, I went to New York Saturday after a ballet class, a belated brunch with a girlfriend, hopped on the train. I went to a jazz event. That next morning, I had tea at La Durée with a friend who happened to be in town from Tokyo and was flying out that afternoon. Then I went to Strand Bookstore. Then I had brunch with another friend. We went to Lady Bird, which is this gorgeous vegan place. Then I had a 3-hour private ballet class. Then I went to jazz and hip hop at Blue Note. And then the next day was another 3-hour class and then came home. And it was just like, oh my gosh, right? But it was great because when you are in certain places, especially 48 hours, you're like, okay, what all can I squeeze in? But I'm like, oh my gosh, like I am so exhausted. Mama just doesn't have the energy that I used to have.
But
so yes,
yeah,
open spots.
Open space, because that was exhausting just listening to that.
It was so fun, you guys. But yes,
she got to see some cool stuff. For our last little piece
Well,
here.
wait. So one more thing, though, with the more open blocks for downtime, what we're referring to, and even with him saying like social obligations, I like to reframe that as social opportunities, right? But it was a lot, right? And so the thing about our last spot that we went to, which was like a week and a half ish, we knew nobody, right? And it was also one of those things where, we were like the driveway to the cabin was like 10 minutes long, and then to get to town was like another 20, 30. So, what was really great about that, though, is I felt like we just had so much open space, and that felt really good. It was a beautiful way to end the trip on kind of like a slower note.
Yeah, we had to be more deliberate about our choices. And, a couple of the places that we would go to were upwards of an hour or more away. And so, yeah, we wouldn't just go there on a whim. It was sort of like, we're going there because we're deliberately choosing this, knowing full well that we're going to be on these incredibly beautiful but windy roads of California, Highway 1. So, yeah, it really was a good way to put the exclamation point on the end of the trip by forcing us to slow down a little bit.
It was so great. But then, we get in the car the morning of my birthday, and we drive, 26 hours pretty much straight.
Yes.
So that sped it back up. But yeah, and then we're in Oklahoma with family, which was so fun. And then back here, 22 hours.
Which it's still kind of stunning. And, I'm getting on a plane in the next few days to go back out west. And of course, the juxtaposition of driving 50 plus hours of drive time just to get out there versus a 5-hour flight is just so crazy. It's a very different way of traveling. But we got to bring the dogs. We got to see things. We got to drive through these incredible places. There's something about how we did it that it was challenging and fun and extra cool. And oh, by the way, we got to have a car the whole time we were there, just like little things that I think made this trip really special and certainly very memorable.
Yes, absolutely. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is well, what if I can't travel? I just don't have the ability. My work isn't remote, or, I have too many obligations at home. I have a garden to tend. I don't know.
Budget. All sorts of things.
Yeah. All sorts of things. And so, a few ideas that I shared during the summer TDJ Live that I just wanted to kind of reiterate here. And I know Tim has some ideas too, is there's this great Rumi quote that says, travel brings power and love back into your life, which I just think is beautiful. And, a couple thoughts. One, of course, is staycationing and being a tourist in your own town or a nearby town. So living in Washington, D.C., of course, we have so many free museums and beautiful gardens and things along those lines. So you could never run out of things to see and do here. But, even if you don't live in a place that is as lush with all of that as we have, there's still so many ways to I have a friend who just rented a hotel room 3 minutes from her place in Brooklyn. But, she was like, I just need a different venue and I just want to be catered to and have white, clean sheets and, the whole thing. So granted, of course, that takes funds to be able to do that. But sometimes it's okay, let me just go and spend a day doing something that really doesn't cost much. Maybe a cup of tea, maybe a bus ticket, or maybe
hop on your bicycle,
for
instance,
or walk. Yeah. And, and then just kind of check some things out, seeing things with new eyes as if you are a tourist in your own town. But the other thing is kind of armchair traveling. And, with that, which is, of course, what we had to do over the past year and a half, but, being able to see a lot of things virtually, whether or not those are specifically themed movies. That's why I loved freaking Emily in Paris, because it was so beautiful to see Paris. And then here are some other ideas. It's watching a travel inspired movie or show like Emily in Paris, listening to travel themed podcasts. There's so many out there. And what's so great is there's even so many solo female travel resources, which I love. putting together like a travel slideshow of your previous travels and kind of going through that and reconnecting to those memories, going on virtual tours. Of course, there's a Louvre, national parks, all sorts of things you can tour virtually. Cook a meal from your favorite destination, right? Order takeout of different cuisines from around the world. And research a trip, just don't book it. It's like to see like, okay, what would it cost? What would it look like? What would my itinerary be? Who else has gone there that I could talk to about this? So those are just some ideas on like, okay, from an armchair sort of travel. The other thing I just want to mention kind of with armchair traveling. So it's the idea of transporting yourself someplace without leaving the comfort of your own home. Some people are super sensitive to so many things that traveling actually is really hard on their nervous system, whether or not it's smells, sounds, things along those lines, being away from their creature comforts. That's why I try to always take my creatures and my creature comforts with me, but you can't always do that. And so, thinking about like, okay, how can I get this experience, but without having to like pack my bags and be exposed to things that might be just really jarring or overwhelming, especially coming out of a pandemic. So I just want to encourage that as an option, for people who are like, oh, I kind of want to, but I'm not quite ready, or I don't quite have the ability to right now, to consider staycationing, armchair traveling, and and kind of like virtual experiences.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in on one of the ones that you talked about, travel planning. One of the things that I do, I have a bicycle travel podcast that I do weekly. But one of the things that I always talk about is I love to travel and camp by bicycle, but my second favorite thing is to plan those trips and really dive into the logistics. Where would I camp? Where would I go? What are the things? What are the routes like? Even just going through Google Maps and doing Street View to see what the bicycle situation looks like on any particular route. That's all really fun. And it was one of the things that helped get me through our travel shutdown COVID era. It was really, really helpful to do that. The other thing that I would say is I think that YouTube is a huge thing for armchair travel. If you're interested in doing any kind of a road trip, there's tons of van life kind of videos. There's all sorts of things about how to do it as well. So you can kind of learn like what we did, where we retrofitted the vehicle. Okay, I did. But point being is that YouTube is a really great resource for all of that. But even more so, especially like if you're into international travel, solo female international travel. There's so many amazing women who are doing so many amazing things with travel and beautiful vistas and things like that. But on top of that, many of them also have vibrant communities within their YouTube channel or beyond on social media. And what you may find is that connecting with like-minded people who follow the same travelers that you do, I think would be a really interesting way for you to kind of expand your horizons. If you're limited in what you can do travel-wise, but you aspire to do more, those communities can be really, really great, and you can learn so much. And Reddit is another great place for that kind of stuff. Even just dumb little things like I'm planning a birthday trip to Disney World, a solo trip, and Reddit has an insane amount of people with an insane amount of knowledge on all of that, and it just helps to make the trip better. So even if you're not going to be doing a trip to Disney World, you can learn a whole lot about it and maybe aspire to that future trip that you're saving up for in 2-3 years or whatever. So lots of different options out there for you to do for free from the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, so that you're not making these plans 2 weeks out while you're driving through the mountains of Idaho, right? So, I love that idea of, Reddit or all these different ways. You can find so many great resources. One thing, too, I want to plug that I find really helpful, and, going to Paris, hopefully, fingers crossed that everything kind of stays somewhat stable, is Airbnb experiences. So even if you're not staying in Airbnb or you don't stay in Airbnbs, there are a lot of wonderful experiences that happen in various cities. and even smallish towns, and of course virtually. So those are really fun to do and sign up for. Even look for ones in your own town, because it's really fun to see like, oh, there's like vegan sushi making, or whatever, like random things. You're like, I had no idea people did this in DC. So I just want to mention that as another good resource. Wonderful. Well, thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. It's just always a treat and delight to be with you. And a couple things I just want to remind you about. One is that I have a new Tea with Kimberly video coming out that will give you access into my packing for this 5.5 week adventure. And, the one thing I will say is we had access to washer and dryer, thank goodness. And that makes a huge, huge difference. So look for that Tea with Kimberly video coming soon. Also, if you are not in our TDJ Insiders Facebook group, you can sign up for that. There's a link in the show notes. And we'll be announcing our August book club pick shortly. Right now, it is the Art of Gathering, which is a beautiful book that I just finished. And I also shared over in the Facebook group today that there's a 4-week kind of free program that she's doing. So check that out in the Facebook group. Again, that's TDJ Insiders Facebook group. And then also, if you're not receiving love notes, you can sign up for those at KimberlyWilson.com/love notes. Find my 6 books and planner. Would be so, so grateful if you took a moment to write a review of this podcast and or any of my books. My hope is that it helps others find a dose of tranquility. And it always means so much to hear from you in ways in which you have been affected by these various works. And also there is TDJ by Kimberly, which is my clothing line, and watch on the blog over the next week or two as I reveal some new designs and some new things that are available that I hope you will be equally excited about. All right, so wishing you a delicious week ahead, and thank you so much for tuning in. And if you have a moment, drop me a note and let me know what you thought of this episode and more. Hello at KimberlyWilson.com. Namaste.